I never imagined rock bottom could smell like vanilla perfume and old marble floors. But that's exactly what I remember in the moment everything changed. My life was collapsing, my father's bankruptcy hearing still echoing in my ears. And yet the first thing I noticed as I stepped into the Grayson mansion was the sweet fragrance of something soft, expensive, and strangely comforting. If fate has a sense of humor, it's a cruel one, because that was the same moment my future was rewritten. The moment I stopped being myself and started becoming someone I never expected to be. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was just the bankrupt boy helping my father salvage the last scraps of our life. I kept my head down, carrying boxes of documents we could barely afford legal representation for. My clothes didn't fit right anymore, all thrift store adjustments and desperation. I could feel the security guards staring at me like I'd already failed, like I was the punchline to a joke they'd heard 100 times before. I remember gripping the strap of my bag so tightly that my knuckles turned colorless. It wasn't fear, it was the weight of disappearing potential, the feeling that the future had closed its door on me. But then she appeared, Alesha Grayson, billionaire heiress, polished like something sculpted out of light, intimidating without trying to be. She wasn't dressed like royalty, but she carried herself like she'd been born knowing she'd never have to worry about survival. I had never felt more painfully aware of who I was. And yet when she looked at me, her eyes held something other than dismissal. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. Like she had been waiting for someone she didn't know until she saw me. "You're Elias Harper," she asked, voice soft but cutting through the air like silk with an edge. I nodded, swallowing the dryness in my throat. Yes, here to clean out what's left. She studied me longer than anyone should study a person they've just met. I felt exposed, like she could see every debt and devastation written on my skin. She stepped closer, her heels tapping against the marble, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "You look like someone who's about to disappear," she said. Not unkind, not mocking, just observing. I wanted to deny it, to straighten my shoulders and pretend I still had dignity, but my voice betrayed me. "It feels like I already have." Something shifted in her expression then, like she just confirmed a theory. She turned and gestured for me to follow her through the mansion. Every step I took felt like a step deeper into someone else's world, a world where my reflection didn't belong. She led me into a room filled with wardrobes taller than I was, mirrors like gateways, and fabrics I had no right to touch. Dresses in silks and satins, colors that caught light like they were made of secrets. It felt like a museum, except nothing was behind glass, like beauty was allowed to touch you if you dared to reach out. "What is this?" I asked. "A solution," she responded. I shouldn't have been afraid, but I was. Not because I thought she meant harm, but because she was offering something I couldn't understand yet. Something that smelled like possibility. She walked behind me, and for the first time I noticed a garment draped over her arm, soft pink and shimmering like dusk. A dress. Feminine in a way that felt intimidatingly gentle. She held it out as if it weighed nothing, even though the idea of it weighed everything. "My family's business needs a face," she said. "A fiancé, actually. Someone the press won't question. Someone who can be shaped into what we need. Someone who can disappear into a new identity and survive it." I felt the world stop. "Why me?" "Because you have nothing left to lose," she said softly. "And I think you're capable of becoming someone no one expects, not even you." My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't know if I wanted to run or answer her. It felt like she had thrown me a lifeline coated in thorns. A chance that came disguised as impossible expectations. "You want me to pretend," I whispered. "I want you to transform," she corrected. My reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger. Jaw too sharp, hair messy, shoulders tense. But the dress she held, it wasn't mockery. It was an invitation. My voice shook as I answered because I didn't know if I was stepping into salvation or surrender. "Who would I be?" She moved closer, lifting the dress just beneath my chin, as if measuring me with her eyes. "Eliora," she said. "A woman of grace, a bride the world will believe in, a new beginning." The name felt like a spark in my chest, terrifying, impossible, and yet, like a version of me I hadn't met yet. Alesha wasn't waiting for me to understand. She was waiting for me to choose. I exhaled slowly. If I say yes, this changes everything. It already has, she replied. Something inside me broke and reformed in that single moment. All the weight of bankruptcy, failure, and humiliation didn't disappear, but it shifted. Became something I could hold differently. Maybe I wasn't losing myself. Maybe I was shedding a version of me that never had permission to survive. My fingers brushed the dress, silk like water, color like softness I'd never been allowed to claim. The idea of stepping into it terrified me, not because it made me feel weak, but because, for the first time, it made me feel seen. Eleora, I repeated, the name fragile in my mouth. I could be her. You will be, Alessia said, if you want to live again. I didn't know if she meant financially, emotionally, or something deeper, but either way, she was right. Because in that moment, bankrupt, desperate, and trembling beneath the weight of a dress I hadn't even put on yet, I realized the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't losing everything. It was discovering you could become someone new. And wanting it. I didn't sleep the night after she offered me that impossible new identity. I lay awake in a guest room that was larger than my entire apartment back home, staring up at a ceiling painted with constellations I didn't recognize. Everything smelled faintly of jasmine and old wealth, like even the air had been bought at auction. My thoughts circled like birds trapped indoors. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or hopeful, maybe some strange blend of both. There was a vanity table at the side of the room, delicate and white, like something out of an antique dream. When I finally forced myself up, I stood in front of the mirror and tried to understand the person I was supposed to become. Elias Harper, bankrupt son, leftover responsibility, ghost of a name tied to debt. A boy whose life had been stolen by numbers. But if I tilted my head, softened my expression, didn't meet my own gaze too directly, I could almost imagine the outline of someone else, someone like Eleora. The name still felt like a borrowed heartbeat. A knock at the door made me flinch. Before I could answer, it opened an inch and Alessia peeked in. Her expression wasn't judgmental, it was assessing, like she was searching for fractures she might fill with purpose. You didn't run, she said quietly. I thought about it, I confessed. I expected you to, she replied, stepping inside. That's how I know you're suited for this. The ones who stay despite fear are the ones who transform. She set a box on the bed with that same deliberate grace she seemed to apply to everything. It wasn't wrapped in ribbons or ornamented like some dramatic theatrical unveiling. It was simple, pale, heavy with implication. What is that? I asked. The first step, she answered. Not the dress, not the role, the preparation. I opened it and felt the breath leave my lungs. Inside was a carefully arranged collection of items. Skincare, cosmetics, gentle brushes, foundation that looked like it could whisper rather than cover. There were false nails trimmed elegantly, not aggressively. A pair of soft silicone pads wrapped like fragile glass. And beneath it all, wrapped in tissue paper, a simple wig cap and a softly curled wig in a shade of brown that matched my natural color. But kinder, smoother, like the version fate would have given me if it had been generous. My throat tightened. I don't know where to begin. That's why I'm here, she said. I won't ask you to know how to be her. I'll teach you. And you'll decide how much of her is a mask and how much was always hidden inside you. Her words felt like stepping onto ice, dangerous, but holding. She guided me to sit at the vanity. My reflection looked like it was waiting for permission to breathe. Alessia stood behind me, her fingers gentle as she brushed my hair back. She didn't move like someone fixing me. She moved like someone revealing me. The motions were careful, patient, strangely respectful. When she placed the wig cap over my hair, I felt something like a curtain being drawn in my mind, not to hide me, but to shift the stage. Relax your jaw, she murmured. Lift your chin slightly, not defiant, just present. I followed her instructions. Elias felt awkward in the mirror. Eleora felt possible. She added the wig, and for a moment I forgot how to inhale. The hair framed my face with a softness I'd never associated with myself. I wasn't transformed, not yet, but I was altered. Simpler changes came next. A bit of primer, barely their foundation, mascara light enough that it didn't shout. She didn't sculpt me like clay. She coaxed something dormant to the surface. When she stepped away, I stared into the mirror and my heart stumbled. I didn't look like a woman, not fully, not convincingly, not like the polished image magazines would demand. But I looked like someone who could become one. And that was more dangerous than perfection. It was hope. I tested the name in a whisper, barely audible. Iliora. Alesha heard it. Again, she said gently. Iliora. This time it trembled, not with fear, with recognition. You'll need more than cosmetics, she said. Voice training, posture, mannerisms, wardrobe tailored to your proportions, and courage. She paused. Especially courage. What if I fail? You will, she said, not unkindly. But you'll fail forward. That's how new identities are born. She had an answer for everything. Not because she was flawless, but because she believed the path existed even when I couldn't see it. She handed me a pair of soft shaping garments, not dramatic, just enough to shift balance, distribute weight. I stepped behind a screen to change, and the fabric alarmed me with its gentleness. Even the texture felt like another language I hadn't learned to speak. When I stepped out, Alesha's reaction wasn't surprise. It was something like confirmation. Stand here, she directed, guiding me to the center of the room. Shoulders relaxed, knees soft. Imagine gravity is your dance partner, not your anchor. I tried. I failed. My weight distribution felt off. My center of gravity conflicted with the costume of femininity I was attempting. I stumbled slightly. She caught my arm, not to steady me physically, but like she was anchoring me to the decision itself. It won't feel natural at first, she said. Don't mistake new for wrong. I feel like an imitation, I admitted. You feel like a beginning, she corrected. Her certainty frightened me more than my doubt did. I didn't know if she was saving me or drafting me into a life I wasn't prepared for. Later, she led me downstairs. The corridors felt warmer this time, like the mansion had shifted its perception of me too. We entered a dining hall where her father, the billionaire, the man whose decisions could alter the trajectory of empires, sat waiting. His gaze landed on me like a test I didn't know the answers to. So this is the candidate, he said, voice heavy with expectation. This is the one who will become the lie the world believes. I could feel my pulse beneath my ribs frantic. My voice wavered. I'm willing to try. No, he said. Trying isn't enough. You must become her. There is no halfway. I don't know if I can. Then learn, he said, as if it were obvious. Identity is a currency. Master it, and no one will ask if you were born with it. I felt like a thread pulled too tight. Alesha moved beside me, her presence a quiet shield. He will rise to it, she said. If we give her the space to grow. Her father studied me. The air didn't move. Time didn't move. I felt judged and chosen in the same breath. Then let the training begin, he said. From this moment on, Elias is a memory. You are Iliora. The name fell over me like a verdict. I didn't know if this was salvation or self-erasure. I only knew that stepping back wasn't an option anymore. I swallowed hard, lifted my chin the way Alesha taught me, and let the possibility settle into my bones. My name is Iliora, I said, voice trembling but present. I'll become her. And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't realize how much a name could change the air around me until I heard it spoken again the next morning. Iliora, Alesha said as she stepped into the training room, sunlight framing her like she was arriving from a future I hadn't caught up to yet. The room wasn't a gym, not exactly, but a polished studio with mirrors from wall to wall, a place built for transformation, but not the kind I understood. When I saw my reflection, my breath hitched. I wasn't dressed in anything dramatic, just simple leggings, a long tunic, and the wig from yesterday tied back loosely. But even that was enough to feel like I'd stepped into a story where the protagonist hadn't learned the rules yet. Today isn't about beauty, Alesha said. It's about embodiment. She walked around me with a teacher's patience. The world decides gender at a glance. Posture, gait, how you react when eyes land on you. You'll need to survive that scrutiny. It wasn't the dresses that scared me, or the makeup, or even the new name. It was the idea that I might fail at the part I couldn't hide behind fabric or cosmetics. The part where the world decides who you are before you speak. She motioned for me to walk. I did. It felt like dragging a curtain that wasn't ready to fall. Again, she said. I walked. Again. I walked. My steps felt wrong, too heavy, too anchored. I wasn't clumsy, but I wasn't graceful either. Alesha stepped beside me, mirroring my pace. Don't minimize yourself, she said. People think femininity is shrinking, softening, apologizing for existing. It's not. It's precision. It's owning which parts of you choose to reveal. I didn't expect that. I always thought being seen was dangerous. That visibility was just another way to get hurt. She guided my shoulders back, not forcefully, just enough to remind my body it had structure. You're not pretending to be delicate, she said. You're learning how to let softness be a strength. I tried again. My posture wasn't perfect, but something shifted, not success, just possibility. Hours passed. We moved from posture to voice. I tried to shape sound the way she asked. Smoother vowels, softer consonants, breath that flowed instead of punched through syllables. My throat felt raw from the effort. I didn't want to sound like I was mocking womanhood. I wanted to sound like I belonged somewhere I'd never been allowed to enter. Don't force it, she murmured. Don't chase high tones, chase intention. A voice isn't a pitch, it's a decision. I closed my eyes. I tried a single sentence. My name is Eleora. Not perfect, but closer. Later, when we stopped, I sat on the studio floor with my back against the mirror. I stared at my reflection, and something ached, not with shame, but with longing. Like I had found a door I was afraid to open. You're thinking too hard, Alesha said, sitting across from me. I'm thinking enough for every person who will stare at me, I said quietly. You can't train for their judgment, she replied. Only your response to it. It was absurd how much weight those words carried. I wanted to ask her why she cared so much, why she chose me for this, why she believed in something I didn't even know I wanted. But the questions stayed trapped behind my teeth. She stood and offered her hand. Come on, there's one more step today. I took it. Her grip was warm, steady. We left the studio and she led me to a room I hadn't seen before. It was a wardrobe room, not the one from before, but another, more personal. Inside it, clothing wasn't arranged like art. It was arranged like steps in a journey. Transitional pieces. Fabrics that eased into new shapes. Dresses that weren't dramatic, just honest. She handed me a dress. Not silk this time, a simple soft blue one, something that could be worn by someone learning to exist in it. My breath trembled as I took it. She turned away to give me privacy, and I changed. It fit imperfectly, the chest shaping slightly off, the waist a hair too generous, the hem brushing my legs like it was asking a question I didn't know how to answer. But when I stepped out, Alesha looked up. For the first time, she smiled like she wasn't evaluating me. She was seeing me. You look like someone who didn't disappear, she said. My chest tightened. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or speak or run. I settled for standing still. Do you want to know the truth? She asked. I nodded. You weren't chosen because you had nothing left to lose, she said. You were chosen because you still had something left to become. I didn't know what to say. Every version of myself collided in my head, the bankrupt son, the imposter, the experiment, the maybe. And beneath all of them, something else, someone else. Not fully formed, but undeniable. Eleora, I said, the word like a fragile bridge I was learning to cross. Elias exists, Alesha replied, stepping closer. But he doesn't have to carry this alone anymore. Her words were warm and dangerous, and exactly what I needed. My eyes stung, but I didn't look away. I lifted my chin the way she taught me. I want to keep going, I whispered. Then you will, she said, one day at a time. And as I stood there in a dress that didn't quite fit and a name that didn't quite belong yet, I realized transformation wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 almosts, 1,000 choices, 1,000 times you don't run. And I wasn't running. I thought the hardest part would be the dress, or the voice training, or the strange new mirror I had to learn to recognize myself in. I was wrong. The hardest part was breakfast. The first morning I came downstairs dressed as Eliora. Not perfectly, not convincingly, but sincerely. The world didn't applaud. It paused. The staff who usually moved through the mansion like clockwork froze in half steps in mid-thought. Conversations clipped shut. Eyes slid toward me then away like they were afraid that looking too long would reveal something uninvited. It wasn't hostility, it was uncertainty. And uncertainty, I realized, could bruise just as easily as cruelty. I sat at the long dining table that could seat 20 people, even though it was just the three of us, Alessia, her father, and me. The place settings gleamed like a ceremony I hadn't been told the rules of. Forks I didn't know where to place. Napkin rings heavy with silver. A teacup so delicate I was afraid my shaking hands would shatter it. Alessia offered a small, encouraging smile, but her father's gaze was unblinking. I could feel the old world on his shoulders, the world where expectations were walls, not doorways. "State your name," he said, as if it were a legal requirement. My voice came out thin. Eliora. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply evaluated the way someone might test a gemstone under a lamp. And who was Elias? My pulse stumbled. A past decision. "And who are you?" I hesitated, my throat tightened, I forced breath into the sentence. "A new one." He lifted his teacup, almost a toast. "Then let us hope she's worth the investment." I didn't know if that was approval or threat. Breakfast continued. Every motion felt like a test. How I held the cup, how I sat, how I breathed. My old instincts wanted to shrink, to fold myself into smallness so I wouldn't be noticed. But shrinking was Elia's. Eliora needed to learn how to be seen. Halfway through the meal, Alessia's father said, "There will be an event this weekend. A charity night. Cameras, investors, press, you'll attend." The fork slipped from my fingers. "I can't, I'm not ready." His eyes hardened. "You don't have the luxury of waiting for readiness. You've been given a future you can't afford to decline." Alessia's voice cut into the tension like velvet with an iron core. "She needs guidance, not pressure." "What she needs," he countered, "is to learn how to withstand the world she's entering." I sat in silence, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the clinking of porcelain. A charity event. Cameras. The public. I wasn't prepared to be that visible. I wasn't prepared to fail on a stage I didn't choose. The room felt smaller, like the walls were leaning closer to hear what I would decide. Finally, I spoke. "If I go, will someone be there to catch me if I fall?" He looked at me without softness. "No one catches you. You learn to balance." Alessia put her hand lightly on mine beneath the table where he couldn't see. "I will," she whispered. The contrast between them was dizzying. Demand and mercy, expectation and faith. I didn't know which one would shape me more. Training intensified that week. It wasn't glamorous. It was humbling. It was frustrating. It was painful in quiet ways, the kind that didn't bruise skin but bruised identity. I learned how to manage eye contact without flinching, how to let softness exist without apologizing for it. I learned how to breathe differently in a room. I learned what to do with my hands when the world was watching. I learned that poise was not the absence of fear, but the decision to arrange it neatly. The wardrobe fittings were the most surreal. A team of stylists hovered around me, pinning fabric, adjusting hems, murmuring measurements. They didn't talk directly to me at first. It was like I was an idea, not a person. But as the dress took shape, dark navy, structured but gentle, the kind of beauty that whispered instead of bragging, some of their hesitation began to thaw. "Turn," one stylist said. I did. "Chin up," another instructed. I lifted it. "Good," a third murmured. "She's learning." "See." The word lingered, not like a compliment, not like a correction, just an observation, a reality acknowledged. I practiced walking in the finished dress, slow steps, poised steps, steps that didn't belong to a bankrupt boy but to someone rebuilt. My reflection startled me, not because I looked like a woman, not fully, not flawlessly, but because I looked like a future, a possibility, a version of myself I didn't want to run from. The night of the event arrived like a verdict. I stood at the top of the mansion staircase, dress fitted, hands trembling, heart chaotic. Alesha appeared beside me in silver satin, radiant and composed. "You're scared," she said. "Yes. That means you're about to change." The car ride to the venue felt like sinking into deep water. I stared out the window at city lights blurring like smudged constellations. I wondered if they could tell I wasn't born for this. I wondered if they cared. When we arrived, flashes exploded like lightning. Cameras, questions, voices calling Alesha's name. And then silence the moment I stepped out. Hundreds of eyes shifted. Curiosity, confusion, assessment. I wanted to retreat, but Alesha's hand found mine. "Just breathe," she whispered. "Breathe like you belong." So I did. One breath. Another. I stepped forward, small, controlled, terrified, but forward. A reporter asked, "And who is this?" My pulse screamed. My voice almost failed. But I lifted my chin just like she taught me. "My name is Eleora," I said. "I'm with her." The world didn't collapse. The sky didn't shatter. No one laughed. Some eyebrows raised. One camera flashed. A few whispers. But the ground stayed beneath my feet. I didn't fall. I stood. Not perfectly, not confidently, but undeniably. I realized in that moment that transformation isn't recognized by everyone at once. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it's just a single step that doesn't break. Inside the event hall, the music swelled. Lights glimmered like stars trapped in chandeliers, and Alesha leaned in close enough for me to hear her heartbeat. "You didn't disappear," she whispered. "No," I breathed, "not this time." And for the first time since my life collapsed, I didn't feel like the bankrupt boy pretending to exist. I felt like someone growing into a name. The charity gala was supposed to be the milestone that proved I belonged. Instead, it became the moment everything shook. Not shattered, but trembled in a way that made me question whether identity could be rehearsed or if it had to be earned. Inside the ballroom, everything glittered. Crystal chandeliers fractured the light into constellations, and the floor looked polished enough to reflect my self-doubt. Every person there seemed sculpted from confidence, tailored suits, immaculate gowns, voices that never wavered when they introduced themselves. I could feel the weight of their gazes on me, not maliciously, but like I was a puzzle piece from the wrong box forced into the picture. Not rejected, just examined. Alesha guided me through the crowd. She didn't drag me, and she didn't shelter me. She placed herself just close enough that I could draw strength from her presence without hiding behind it. Her father followed at a distance, his watchful stare like a metronome ticking away expectations. People approached. Introductions tangled in the air. Some smiled with polite confusion, others with measured understanding. Then came the question I feared most, the one no training could prepare me for. "So how do you know Alesha?" I froze. I rehearsed for posture, for poise, for breath. I didn't rehearse for this. Alesha answered for me, calm as a sunrise. "She's important to me," she said, "and to our future." The pronoun landed softly. She. It held the room for a moment, suspended like a note waiting to resolve. I saw the flicker of calculation in the guests' eyes, but no one challenged it. They didn't need to understand to accept it. The world wasn't made of approval or rejection, it was made of observation. Tonight, I was being observed. We were given seats near the front. I tried to stay composed, but every tiny gesture felt magnified, where I placed my hands, how I crossed my legs, how I inclined my head when spoken to. All things Alesha taught me, but now I had to make them mine. Authenticity isn't the absence of effort, it's effort that stops feeling like effort. Halfway through the night, while the auctioneer droned on about rare artwork, Alesha leaned close enough that her perfume wrapped around the moment. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. "Like glassware," I whispered. "Pretty from a distance, fragile up close." "You don't feel fragile to me," she said, and the certainty in her tone felt like a hand on my spine, helping me stand taller. But just when I thought the evening had stabilized, something shifted. A man approached, sharply dressed, confidence tailored into every angle of him. He looked at me with narrowed eyes, studying my face like a memory he couldn't quite reach. "I know you," he said. My chest tightened. I don't think we've met. He tilted his head. You look familiar. From the Harper bankruptcy hearings, perhaps. There was a boy there, a son. The floor dropped under me. Elias. He wasn't accusing, just connecting dots. But even a neutral truth can feel like a threat when you're standing in a borrowed identity. Alesha stepped forward, her presence protective. This is Eleora, she said firmly, and she is here with me. The man blinked. Confusion, hesitation, then a polite apology and a retreat into the crowd. No confrontation, no scene. But the damage wasn't in what he did. It was in what it triggered. The realization that the past didn't disappear just because I walked differently or spoke differently or wore a name like new skin. Elias lingered like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I stepped away from Alesha and found a quiet corner behind a marble column. My breath trembled, my pulse chaotic. What am I doing? What if this isn't becoming? What if it's disappearing? What if I'm building a future on a foundation that still remembers who I used to be? My reflection in the tall window looked wrong for a second, not because I didn't look like Eleora, but because I suddenly looked like both. A dual existence trying to share a single body. I don't know how long I stood there before Alesha found me. She didn't ask what was wrong. She saw it. She stepped beside me, shoulder to shoulder, reflections aligned in the glass. You can't erase who you were, she said quietly. That's not the goal. Then what is? My voice cracked. To grow around it, she answered. To stop treating your past like a crime. I swallowed hard. He recognized me. No, she said. He recognized a memory, not the person standing here. I looked at our reflections again. Elias wasn't gone, but Eleora wasn't imaginary either. I was both. I was transition. I was unpacked potential. What if people see through me? I whispered. Then let them, she said. Visibility isn't a weakness, it's evidence you exist. Her words didn't erase the fear, but they gave it shape. A shape I could hold instead of drowning in. As the event continued, something changed. Not externally, no magic, no applause, no cinematic validation. The shift was internal. I stopped trying to perform Eleora and started letting her live. My posture softened not with insecurity, but with ownership. My steps became deliberate instead of careful. My voice found a cadence that wasn't mimicry, but possibility. Near the end of the night, her father approached me. I braced for scrutiny. Instead, he offered something else, not warmth, but acknowledgement. You held the room, he said. Not flawlessly, but you held it. I was terrified, I admitted. Good, he replied. Courage is only proven in the presence of fear. It wasn't praise, but it was enough. In the car ride home, silence filled the space like a blanket. I watched the city pass by, lights streaking across the windows like reminders that movement doesn't require certainty. Alesha, I said softly, do you think this is really me, or is this just survival wearing makeup? She looked at me, not at the wig, not at the dress, not at the practiced posture, at me. I think, she said, this is the first time you've ever been allowed to ask that question, and that means it's real. Outside, the night continued. Inside, I did too. I didn't know where the journey was leading. I didn't know who would recognize me, or who would doubt me, or who I would still become. But I knew one thing with more clarity than anything before. Elias wasn't being erased. Eleora was being born. I never imagined that one night could rewrite the borders of my identity, but that evening did. The gala's echoes were still inside me like a second heartbeat, the chandeliers, the music, the way eyes followed me not with suspicion but with belief. The car ride back to the boutique felt unreal, like I was floating somewhere between two lives and didn't know where my feet belonged anymore. When we stopped, the city lights reflected in the window, and I caught my own eyes staring back. Not the boy who walked into bankruptcy, but not fully the woman everyone believed I was either. Somewhere in between. Someone unfinished, and yet more real than ever. Vera closed the door behind us when we entered the boutique, her heels quiet against the floor. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at me, studying me the way a sculptor studies a statue that's learning how to breathe. You held yourself together tonight, she said softly. You didn't crumble, you didn't run. I let out a nervous laugh, shaky and brittle. I almost did, I admitted. You just didn't see it. She smiled in that way she did when she knew the truth before I spoke it. Everyone almost runs, she said. Only some people stay anyway. That's what makes them different. I wanted to ask her who she thought I was becoming, but before I could speak, the door opened again. It was him. The billionaire whose world had brushed against mine like a spark waiting for fuel. He stepped inside without the usual echoes of confidence, as if he'd left that persona outside with the valet. His eyes found mine immediately, as though he'd been rehearsing the moment. I need to ask you something, he said, voice low, not commanding, not demanding, just honest in a way that startled me. Out there tonight, the world saw you a certain way, but what did you see? My breath caught. No one had asked me that. Not who I was supposed to be, not what I pretended to be, but who I saw when I stood in front of the mirror, terrified and hopeful at the same time. I didn't know what answer he expected, and I didn't know what answer I wanted to give, so I told the truth, or as close as I could get to it. I saw someone I didn't recognize, I whispered, but I also didn't want to run from them. He nodded like that made sense, like it was the only answer that mattered. Then came the question I wasn't ready for. Is she real? He asked, gently, carefully. Not an accusation, not suspicion, just a door, a chance to step through or step back. And suddenly it wasn't about gowns or makeup or bankruptcy or survival anymore. It was about identity, about truth. My voice trembled. She feels real, I said. I just don't know if the world will let her be. His expression softened, something warm flickering behind his eyes. Sometimes the world follows after the person, he said, not the other way around. I didn't know whether to believe him. Vera stepped closer, placing a hand on my back like she was anchoring me to something stable. He's asking if you want to stay as her, she murmured. Not for him, for yourself. The silence after that felt heavy enough to bend gravity. I could hear my heartbeat. I could hear the city outside. I could hear the version of myself I used to be, the boy who had nothing left except fear pleading for certainty. But certainty doesn't come like answers. It comes like choices. I took a breath, and in that moment I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to correct him. I didn't want to confess. I didn't want to unravel what I had built, even if it was fragile, even if it was borrowed, even if it wasn't how I thought my future would look. I wanted to see what happened if I didn't step backward, so I didn't. I lifted my chin, held his gaze, and said the closest thing to a truth I had. I'm still learning, I told him. But I want to see where she goes. He didn't smile triumphantly or look relieved. He just nodded like he understood the weight of the sentence. Then let me help, he said. If you'll let me. Something in his voice made it clear this wasn't about ownership or rescuing me. It was about stepping alongside me, not ahead. I didn't know if I trusted him yet, but I trusted the possibility. And that was enough to keep me standing there instead of running. But the world doesn't stop to let identity bloom quietly. The next moment shattered the calm, a sharp knock at the boutique door, firm and unmistakable. Vera turned, confusion flickering in her eyes. The billionaire stepped back slightly, his expression tightening. I didn't move like my body had turned to glass. The knock came again, louder this time. Whoever was outside wasn't here for dresses or appointments. They were here with purpose. Vera glanced at me and whispered, "Stay behind me." But I stepped forward instead, pulled by something deeper than fear. The door opened, and the streetlight spilled inside. A figure stood in the doorway, someone I never expected to see again. Someone who shouldn't have known where I was. Someone who knew the version of me I thought I had left behind. Their eyes locked onto mine. "Is that really you?" they asked. And just like that, everything I'd built, the gown, the name, the night, the fragile piece, trembled like glass under a hammer. The figure in the doorway was someone I never expected to confront, someone who had been part of the life I had abandoned, or had been forced to leave behind. My chest tightened, breath uneven, as my past collided with my present. The streetlight spilled across their face, sharp and unforgiving, highlighting the recognition in their eyes. "Elias?" they asked, voice cracking as though it had been waiting years to find me again. I felt every version of myself compress into a single moment. Elias, bankrupt, desperate, trembling in alleyways. Eleora, poised, practiced, standing on the edge of possibility. Neither felt complete, and yet both had to coexist. I swallowed hard, letting the silence stretch between us until I finally spoke. "I'm Eleora," I said, voice steadier than I expected, the name tasting like reclamation on my tongue. It wasn't just a word. It was survival, rebirth, defiance. I'm who I am now. The recognition in their eyes didn't fade. Instead, it shifted, a subtle flicker of understanding. They stepped closer cautiously, as if approaching a fragile sculpture, and said softly, I never thought I'd see you like this. I didn't know you could be this strong. The words hit me in ways no training, no dresses, no mirrors could have prepared me for. Strength wasn't something I had known I owned. It had always been buried beneath fear, beneath debts, beneath the desperate attempts to survive as someone I was. But now it felt tangible, real. Vera stepped behind me, a quiet anchor, while the billionaire remained beside us, silent, watching, patient. And in that moment, I realized that fear had never been the enemy. It was the measure of growth. The ache in my chest, the trepidation in my knees, the tremor in my hands, they were all proof that I was alive, that I was evolving, that I had the courage to be seen. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years pressing into the floorboards, then lifting just enough to breathe freely. I've been hiding, I admitted, trying to survive as someone else, but I can't. Not anymore. I'm Eliora now, and I want to see where that takes me. The figure in the doorway smiled, not mockingly, not with judgment, but with recognition. It wasn't a complete understanding, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement that the person standing before them had emerged from the ashes of the boy they once knew. Eliora, they repeated, testing the name, letting it settle in their mouth. You really are her. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The boutique's soft lights seemed to hum with quiet approval, the gowns around us swaying gently as if celebrating something imperceptible. The air held a tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying, fear, expectation, doubt all suspended, waiting for release. And then, slowly, I felt it, a shift inside me, subtle but undeniable. I was no longer just pretending. I wasn't merely surviving, I was becoming. The billionaire's voice broke the silence, calm, decisive. You've faced the world tonight, he said, and you've held yourself, not perfectly, not without fear, but you stood. That is the mark of someone who can step fully into themselves. His gaze lingered on me, and for the first time I understood. Validation wasn't about the world approving me. It was about recognizing that I had claimed my own existence unapologetically, without hiding behind the boy I once was. Vera stepped forward then, her eyes bright with pride. You've always had the courage, she said. You just needed permission to see it. I swallowed the lump in my throat, letting the words sink. Not because they were about me, but because they reflected what I had always known, deep inside, beneath layers of fear and failure. I had permission from the only person that truly mattered, myself. I moved to the center of the boutique, the gowns and fabrics around me catching the soft lamplight like fragments of dreams stitched into reality. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and felt the transformation in a way that wasn't about appearances or names or roles, but about being. I was Eliora, yes, but more importantly, I was whole, vulnerable but whole, frightened but courageous, shaped by the past yet no longer controlled by it. Outside, the city waited, indifferent to my new identity, unaware of the small revolution I had enacted within myself. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had chosen to step forward, to be visible, to claim a version of myself I had never dared to acknowledge. And in that choice, I discovered freedom. Freedom from fear, from doubt, from the bankruptcy that had once defined me. Freedom to grow, to change, to exist fully as who I was. The figure in the doorway stepped forward one last time, and with a gentle nod, they said, Then I'll follow your lead. Not to shape you, not to guide you, but to witness you. And maybe learn from you. Their words felt like a benediction, a bridge between the past and the future, between who I had been and who I was becoming. I exhaled again, letting the tension fall away. I didn't know what the next chapter held, press scrutiny, social challenges, endless adjustments. But I did know this. For the first time in my life, I was no longer running from myself. I was stepping into the light I had been too afraid to claim. Every step, every breath, every moment belonged to Eliora, and I was ready to live it. I turned, finally, and smiled. Not at anyone in particular, not for anyone's validation, but for myself. And in that smile, I recognized a truth I had spent years denying. Sometimes, the most profound transformations come not from being someone else, but from finding the courage to finally be who you were meant to become. The boutique was quiet now, the night deep outside, the city lights twinkling like scattered stars. And I stood there, bankrupt boy behind me, billionaire's world around me, and a future unfolding in front of me. I was Eliora, I was alive, and I had arrived.